I have it written down.
All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. I appreciate everybody coming, and I appreciate the people who are with us virtually. I just have a couple of things I want to say. The most important part of this meeting is for the church, which is a very important part of Cotuit, to share with the village the expansion plans that they have developed and worked very hard on over a number of years. And the objective is to make sure that villagers are generally aware of what is intended and have the opportunity for input to the extent that they would desire. A couple of preliminary notes. Number one, this is an experiment. We have never yet tried to do both an in-person and a virtual meeting. So the inevitable technological mishaps will, I'm sure, be taken with great equanimity because they will happen. We're going to have this presentation, then we will have an opportunity for questions. I would ask people who are in the audience who would like to ask a question to use a microphone so that people who are listening on Zoom have the opportunity to hear you. And those who are on Zoom are muted. I'm sure you're tired of hearing me say this at this point, but that's not to silence you. It's because open mics and background noises can be very distracting. So what I would ask is if you would like to speak, enter your name in the chat function. And periodically I have to zip over here and admit additional people who are in the waiting room. We will call on you, and then you would type your question into the chat and I would read it, because we have not yet mastered the ability for the people in the audience to actually speak in a way that can be heard. That's the fault of my technological assistant. And thank you, Paul. You know, this is not part of his responsibilities, and he graciously volunteered his time to help us to get this set up. A couple of other quick things. That would be great if you would, Melanie. I don't think you need to do it just yet, but as people now know, we do have a parade on the 4th of July. It was a surprise to me that the town actually approved our having a parade, but they did. And we are pulling it together as effectively as we can. Though we do ask that anybody who has not been fully vaccinated, please make sure to wear a mask. I know that nobody wants to wear masks anymore. I know that most of us have been fully vaccinated, but not everybody has. And it's important that we try to respect the condition of everybody else in the village. So that's a request that we have received from the Barnstable Public Health Department. If there is anybody on the Zoom or here who would like to volunteer to help, because notwithstanding the fact that we were hoping to keep it a nice, quiet Cotuit parade, the town chose to publicize it. And based upon the attendance at last night's baseball game, I would expect that we will see a very significant number of people here in the village on the 4th of July. The starting time is different than usual. We are starting at 11:30. That is because we do not want to interfere with the services that will be going on at the church, which begin at 9 o'clock. But inevitably, people gather for a parade about an hour and a half before it's supposed to start. So I'm hopeful that we will be able to do this in a way that doesn't disturb the people who are trying to enjoy the church services. Anybody who'd like to volunteer, send me an email. You can do it at cotuitcivicassociation@gmail.com. Dick Hamilton, who has volunteered every year since the American Revolution, is very happy to do it yet once again to keep his record intact. He'll be at his usual post. Actually, there's a little brick in the sidewalk where he usually stands. It says in honor of Dick Hamilton. But in all seriousness, we do want to have people who can make sure that we maintain safety along the route. So anybody who's interested in volunteering can send an email, as I indicated, or they can simply show up at the post office at about 11 o'clock, and we will give you vests and areas of responsibility. So I know that nobody came to hear me, so I would turn it over to the good people from the church. Jennifer, who is going to speak first, will take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Jim. And
Chief, thank you for helping with the technology to get us in this hybrid mode for our presentation tonight. So yes, we're here to talk about this wonderful project that we've been working on for several years. Some of you have heard this presentation a couple times because we have been talking to various groups over the past year and a half. So Jim, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. And I want to thank the people that have taken the time to Zoom as well. So as you, back one. There we go. So we have this wonderful congregation member that wrote a little poem about our church. And one line that hit the most for our project team is one that says, "Our little church with a big heart yearns to grow." We know the library recognizes itself as the heart of the village. I'm just going to pick off something that Angie mentioned earlier, that we may be the soul of the village. So working together, we're a small little village, but together we are all good neighbors. And part of this communication process is to make sure that everybody in the village knows what we're doing with our building expansion project. So Jim, next slide. I think it's important for me to recognize who's been working on our project. So Pastor Angie, Scott Berkey, Pam Bowden, Carol Giller, Dick Hamilton, myself, John Murray, Pete Roner, and Tim Wakefield. And what's incredible about this team is we've been working together primarily since 2018. Some of these folks have been working on it earlier, but we've been a consistent team. We've been a consistent in meeting. We meet every week, we work hard. And what's been very valuable is we've been sharing our work with various people, with the congregation, getting feedback, talking to the community. What's important about this team is we all have a very diverse background. We have people with financial backgrounds, marketing backgrounds, various kinds of skill sets that makes us a very unified team to be able to work on this project together. And Jim, if you can go to the next slide. So the last time we met here at Freedom Hall with the Civic Association public meeting was in August of 2018. And I can say that we've come a long way in so many different ways. So I'd like to talk from a historical perspective, because this church has a lot of history, but I'm only going to take us back to 2019. One of the very important steps that we did in 2019 is engaged with a consulting firm called CCS Fundraising. And their support of our project was to understand, were we going to be able to raise enough money for this project? So with their skill set, their expertise, we were able to set a goal of $3.5 million on our project to make sure were we going to be able to have the financial sustainability to support the project. In 2019, we started what we called the silent phase of fundraising. So by year end, at the end of 2019, we were able to raise $1.96 million, which was astronomical, and very pleased with, through pledges and donations. We even had one community member give us a matching donation of $250,000. So that was incredible. Very important discussion, this was led by John Murray and support of some folks in the community, was we started some discussions with the UMC leadership about some of our property, in particular the church and the parsonage. And you'll learn in one of the major milestones that we had in 2020 was that we were able to secure the properties that I just mentioned, and they became part of our assets. As I mentioned earlier, talking to our congregation, getting feedback on the design, what was the church going to look like? We had very multiple design workshops, learning from people what was important, what kinds of features should we have in the buildings, what are we missing, what's important. Jimmy, could go to the next slide. In 2020, we were able to still accomplish a lot, even though we had the pandemic. Fundraising receptions, we had multiples before the year really kicked off. meeting with our congregation members to raise money. We continued with our design and feedback workshops. And then in March, things really changed for all of us and throughout the rest of the year. But we were still able to accomplish the capital campaign, unfortunately, had to be postponed for obvious reasons, but we did do some limited fundraising during the year. And then one of the people that you're going to meet this evening is Mike Kilsinger from Conserve. We spent time in October determining who was going to be our architect and builder, and we're pleased to have hired Conserve out of Sagamore. And you'll learn a little bit more about what Mike has to say about the design. Next, Jim. Oops, back one. Okay. A lot of what we were doing at the end of 2020 and consistently going on throughout the year is working on the building design. It has morphed in so many different ways, changed to meet our needs and what we're looking for. We were actually started the capital campaign public phase in March, and it's still ongoing. So if you remember in the prior slide at the end of 2019, we had 1.96 million. Well, pleased to say right now we're at $2.85 million. That's made up of 129 donors. 70% of that is from our congregation, 30% from the community, and almost 85% of the folks from our congregation give to our annual pledge. So almost 100%, and I'm optimistic we're going to hit that amount. Important for us is community communications. So over the past couple of months, Peter and myself have spent a lot of time talking to different boards. We spoke to the Civic Association board, the Friends of the Library board. We spoke to our abutters. Any little community boards that we could get involved in, we're getting in front of them. An important thing that's associated, not directly, but indirectly, is what's going on with the Cotuit Post Office. So if people aren't aware, that's one of our assets. And right now, we're currently doing our lease negotiations with them. We're paying off the mortgage in a couple months, and that's going to be a very important revenue stream for us. And then lastly, our groundbreaking is going to happen in August, or I should say after Craft Fest. Craft Fest is happening at the end of August, groundbreaking shortly after. That's our goal for this year. So I should have mentioned, we'll reserve questions for the end, but right now I'd like to bring Pete Roner up, and he's going to spend time talking about the building design.
Thank you, Jen. I certainly can't beat that discussion. Yeah, that was wonderfully done. Thank you. I'm the engineer, and I have spent the time during the pandemic, instead of going crazy, building a model. And this is the model. It reflects the current, basically the current plans of our building. It shows some concentric buildings, additions. The architect has gone a long ways to achieve that. There we go. To make some streamlines in both directions, and included a nice little parking lot in the corner of High Street here. Okay. No. Yeah, there we go. Okay, in the corner here. And this is the new entrance in this area. And when you go around the corner, next slide, please. We have the view from High Street. Parking lot on this side, the new entrance. And along here, next slide, please. And this is the School Street. This is the new entrance right on School Street. And it's got a handicap ramp. You can see it in both slides here. And it has what we call a bride's walk between our craft room and the new entrance. Next slide, please. This is the view from the park. And the highlight on this particular one is not only the windows, which will be changed a little bit. We lost this one. And we have a patio. And the patio tucks behind our old fellowship hall, tucks right in the corner here of our new one, and has a flat area all along here that we'll be able to sit in attendance. In the last 2 Sundays, I've attended service at our church, and it's just wonderful to see how well the service plays outside. And I can just imagine being able to do that in the future with this one, and also be using it for Craft Fest entertainment. We have some large singing groups and so forth that usually sit on the steps and sing for us. Well, now they have a full area. Next slide, please. This is the view from the north side. It's two layers. We have our fellowship hall on the top, and we have a available space on the bottom. There we go. On the bottom section here. This is like a meditation area because it's quiet and private, and we have access from the front down a steep path or possibly some stairs. Next slide, please. This is the front entrance. As we said before, it's all glass in this area. And I want to take you inside for a moment. When you first go in, directly in front of you will be an elevator and a set of stairs that can get you down to the lower level where we currently have our nursery school that operates during the week. Back up on the first floor, if you want to visit our administrative assistants, you take a right, and this will all be posted on signs, and it'll be right in here. On our left is the new building. We have restrooms right here. We have a kitchen there, and behind it is a full-size fellowship hall. Next slide, please. Your turn.
So I'm Mike Hilsinger with Conserve Group, and we are architects and builders, and we were lucky enough to get awarded this project, which we're very excited about. And really the main objective is, as you know, Peter's model shows really nicely, is to make an addition that doesn't look like an addition. It wants to look like it's been there all along. So we'll be matching a lot of the architectural details, the exposed rafter tails, the corbels on the exterior. We'll be using the same siding that's in place now. And we've worked really hard. The scale is a little bit bigger on the fellowship hall, but we've worked hard to make it look like it's been there all along. So as a result, the new section of the building, this doesn't work so good on the screen. There we go. And right here is the line, the demarcation line between old and new construction. This is all new in the back with the entrance turned 90 degrees, of course. And then over in here, the demarcation line is here on the left side of the existing hall. And added to that will be this new lobby area, as Peter pointed out, bathrooms, kitchen, and then a new fellowship hall in the rear here and the patio. There's some little bit of changing within the existing spaces. The old kitchen gets repurposed and so forth, but outside of that, the building is relatively the same. We bump out a little piece here at the office. For those familiar with the building, you enter here at this point, and there's a set of stairs. Those will go away and be replaced by the new stairs over in this end of the building. So I should point out at the altar, we're going to make some changes. There are 2 rooms either side of the altar, which will get opened up. And we will install a lift here for wheelchair accessibility to the altar from the sanctuary level. Next slide, please. Downstairs in the lower level, basically the same for the most part. Here you can see the new addition nicely here. No basement under this new addition. We're just going to have that be slab on grade, so to speak. It'll be an elevated slab on grade. And then over in here, we pick up some storage under what will be the entrance. There's your stairs down and your elevator on the lower level. Another set of bathrooms, potentially future bathrooms here on the lower level with some storage space and a multi-purpose room that is relatively wide open space. There'll be a series of columns down the center but nice egress out onto a patio level down here as well, so that this can be a nice usable space going forward. Next slide, please. It's a little close up. This is 180 degrees from the drawing you just looked at, where the altar would have been down here on this side, but bear with me. So this is the altar as you face the church. And this is one wall that will be coming out, and another wall that are coming out to expand this space, give a little bit more air up here, so that this just works as a little more cohesive way. And I think we've got a rendering of that we can show in the next slide, please. So this is an elevation view of the altar, newly opened. So where this was closed either side before, will now be opened up. We're going to reincorporate some windows to this end of the altar to get some light in here. These are windows that once existed on this end of the building that will be reintroduced, and should help get some nice light in this area. Next slide, please. So this is the first rendering of this area, and for those familiar with it, you'll see it's a lot more open. You know, these walls are out on both sides, and you know, we'd like to think that there'll be a lot more light in this space and really help bring it up. But again, you know, the goal is to not look like we've been here when we're done. The architectural details. Oh, there we go. Wait a minute. There we are. Architectural details will be continued as they are now. Same at the rear when we're doing the work there. We don't want to introduce new elements. We want to complement the elements that are there, and we just want to take advantage of the space that is available there. So this should help to open things up quite a bit. I think we have another view of this in the next slide, please. Just to give you a view on this side. I think we still have some discussion about organ and piano placement to take care of, but we'll get there. But again, trying to leave the originality and just to make the best of the space that's available without any indication of the fact that this wasn't built this way originally. The only real indication will be sprinkler heads, which are going to be new. But again, very important for a building of this age and vintage is to protect it. And that's always very tricky. So we will do our best to make sure we do that in the least intrusive way. Next slide, please. So this is just a little close up. These are the patio doors to the new community building. And this would be viewed from just to come over here real quickly, this wall right here from the patio looking into the community hall. Next slide, please. This is just a cross section to give an idea of what the community hall looks like from the inside. It will have a vaulted ceiling that follows the roof line up to an extent and then comes across flat. We've got to hide our sprinklers and our HVAC up in here. But the more recent addition is this really large window in the center, which is designed to reflect the existing stained glass windows that have been in the building before. They've seemed to have wandered around during various renovations, and will find their way back to their original location here at the back of the sanctuary. And this center window is the same scale as this. So we're just reflecting that again to try to pull the two ends of the building together and make them look like they've been that way all along. Next slide, please. This is another section. This one's a little bit harder. So this is straight through the sanctuary. This is the narthex wall. And just on the other side of these doors is the foyer area. And above this is all glass. We haven't really had a final about this, but this is an existing stained glass window that will be put back in place here to add some color to the back. And all the other glass is designed to get as much light again in both directions into this space. Everything else, the roof line will follow, what is in there currently, and we will add architectural details to carry all the way around the back to, again, make it look like it was built that way, and it's been one contiguous space since the beginning. The next slide, please. Here we are back on High Street, and you can just get a feel for the building again. This is the existing building line here, so this is all new in this direction. Everything on this side to the right exists. We're going out towards the back in this particular view, but you do see the two new windows here and here that will be added back to this end. Here we are now in the back. We've got our newly relocated windows here. This is a new window to duplicate these, and it's got its twin down at this end. And then again, north side with the patio, as Peter pointed out earlier, down on this lower level, and the fellowship hall up on the top. This is go back just one more. So this is just one last window that will be incorporated. This is courtyard looking south, so it's on the north wall of the sanctuary. And again, taking the windows that have been in storage for years and repurposing them and getting them back to where people can see and appreciate them. You can see also this is the cut line from old to new, and we're going to move the steeple along with it so that it is framing the entrance on the opposite side. I think that's about it for me, right? Angie? Just in case.
Great, thank you. I am sharing a little bit about the why are we doing this. And I have a couple images of our church, and we've learned in the last year during the pandemic that the church is the people and not the building, because we've spent the majority of the last year worshiping online. But before we got moved to online, we were in the place where we were really struggling to have enough space to serve our congregation. In church growth, they'll tell you if you're 80% full, you're full. That if families come to your sanctuary and they have to split up and find different seats, that discourages people from coming back. And we had that happening. People would come at the end of a service, or right before the service would be beginning, and they would have to send two kids up there and the dad back there. And so people were splitting up. We had baptisms where family members were in the narthex and outside because we didn't have seating for them. We've had funerals where people have walked away because we didn't have adequate space for them to gather to remember someone that they loved. And so that shaped our conversations. At first, we thought we were going to just be doing some rehab on the outside. Started thinking about what needed to be done. We realized it was an opportunity to think about, is it possible for us to create some more space? And would people be excited about that? Would the church support that? And it turned out that people were really excited about that, and that a lot of people have stepped forward to support this project. You'll see, this isn't Christmas, but I mean, it's an Advent. It's not Christmas Eve. We're just full, and there's not a lot of space for people to sit, and the same in our fellowship hall. Some people have said to me, like, there's a fear that we're going to become a mega church. And this is not like a mega church design. We're going from being like the little church on the green to being the medium-sized church on the green. So we are really hoping that what you've seen shows our effort for this to fit in the village, for it to be right-sized, for it to look something like a lot of the houses that, kind of build on a little bit and a little bit. And we hope that we can serve the village. We love this space here, but we also recognize that the bathrooms here aren't accessible, and that there's no kitchen. And so we're hoping that we will be a space that not just church can gather, but the community can gather. And that's something that we already do. We have 3 AA groups and an NA group that meet at our church. We have chair yoga for elders that meet twice a week. We have an artist group that comes and does art in our hall, and we want to continue to in a variety of ways. So, oh, and they meet down here, but they do with things like spaghetti dinners and things at our church, and we want to continue to support them. They're big craft fest presence as well. So I think then we just have the final slide that if you have questions, we would be happy to answer them. I'll bring up the team, and we can all be here to answer questions that you might have. And again, we want to invite you to use the microphone so that people who are Zooming have a chance to hear.
And those who are Zooming, if you have questions, just enter them into the chat function and I will read them to the people who are making the presentation. It was such an amazing presentation that I'll start with a question. How much feedback have you gotten from the abutters, and what has been their reaction to this newer proposal?
Yeah. Well, we had our butters meeting on May 8th, I believe it was. We had about 10 people. We understand this is change for our neighbors. It was an opportunity for them to see what it was going to look like, particularly like the parking lot and then the newer community building. This was the second time that we were able to meet with them. Some of them saw that based on their feedback that we had taken those things into consideration, particularly along, I'm pointing on the model for the people on Zoom, that where we had some of the landscaping that we were going to do and kind of respected some of the comments that they made on that. So, we did get some questions from them. They did have questions about our operations, like were we expanding things more around our hours that we were doing, like for events, like weddings and things like that. And our policies really aren't changing on our operations just because we have a bigger building. So from that standpoint, we're keeping policies the same.
Assuming everything goes forward, what do you think is the timetable for the commencement of construction, and how long will the project take? Not looking for a guarantee, just looking for some understanding generally for people.
The standard answer is 2 weeks. We anticipate starting in September, and we will more than likely go about 10 months on the project.
That's very fast. Yeah.
Ish.
Our hope is that we'll have some part of the building available for all times, like when we're moving out of the sanctuary, that we will either have Bruce Hall or the new hall available. But there will be some periods when they're doing fire suppression, like at least 2 weeks, that we'll be out of the building entirely. So, but our hope is that there will be some space available, and we'll be moving printers around and people around and worship around. It's going to be an exciting year.
I hate to dominate the questions, but since nobody else is asking them, I'll keep going. So when the construction is ongoing, uh, what do you think is going to be an impact on traffic in the neighborhood? Because School Street is a very busily trafficked road, at least in certain times of the year.
It is, yeah. I don't anticipate a lot of traffic there. The first thing that we'll do is clear the area for what will be a future parking lot, which will allow us to pull construction vehicles off the street. The site work will have times when there will be, dump trucks, larger trucks coming and going as we're doing excavating or concrete work. But I don't anticipate, it's not a large construction project. It's certainly a construction project in a small area, but it's not a large construction project where we would have to stage vehicles, steel delivery, crane, that sort of thing. We don't have any of that. So when we are excavating and removing material, we'll have some larger trucks coming and going. But for the most part, we'd like to pull them off the street. When we do the work, we'll typically build some ramps to get up over curbs and that sort of thing, so we can keep these vehicles off the roadway. So our goal is to always have as little impact as possible, and it really helps us work better too if we can get the vehicles out of the street and not be in the way.
I guess the other question that comes to my mind at least is, we keep reading about the increase in construction costs and the shortage of materials. So I'm sure you've gotten several requests for certainty that is hard to deliver in a project like this, in this kind of a time frame. How do you feel at this juncture, at least, about the impact of any of that might have on the construction project itself and the costs?
Yeah, very legitimate concern. It's been a surprise to all of us, quite honestly. COVID has had some really strange impacts on manufacturing. Items that we never anticipated that would turn into long lead times. Glass is a good example. We had a project in Plymouth recently where we had to tarp the windows because we had no glass to put in the windows, even though we were well ready for it. In this case, the materials are not hard to come by necessarily, but they have risen in price considerably. Our hope is that will correct itself between now and September, at least to a degree, so that we come a little bit back down to a more reasonable level. A lot of it is just supply chain issues. There's no less lumber than there was, or at least sources of lumber than there was a year ago. It's either a manufacturing or, in many cases, a shipping issue. Canada's borders closed down, for instance, and we get a lot of lumber from Canada. They're just not able to move things across the border. Truck drivers, aren't working that were working before, and that sort of thing. So with any luck, as the summer comes and the world opens up more and more, we'll get back to business as usual, and we'll see a correction in prices. We're already seeing lumber futures come back in the right direction, and hopefully those futures will be as predictive as they're supposed to be, and we'll see the prices on the materials themselves follow suit.
We have a question from the audience, but I would ratify the point about lumber. Apparently, the lumber futures were down by like 30% over the last 3 or 4 days, which is a good sign. We have a question from Lisa Mycott Kelly. Would you revisit whether or not weddings will be allowed, and what the plan would be to address the parking concerns that come with weddings? And in particular, while it's not stated here, is, would there be an increase in size of the weddings, which might exacerbate parking problems that you might have?
I mean, we'll continue to welcome people to have weddings. We have had weddings where people have chartered buses and brought their guests to the reception. I guess my hope is that when we have weddings, we've had weddings where people have been standing along the outside of the aisles of the church, that then those people would be seated. So I anticipate weddings would still be a similar, maybe slightly larger size, but that everyone would be more comfortable. So we're adding an additional 6 or 7 pews, which are 60 or 70 seats.
So it's a total aggregate add of 60 to 70 seats.
Mhm.
And what is the existing seating capacity?
150.
Okay.
Mhm.
I think one thing to add to this, even though we're demonstrating growth here, I think that one of the take-home messages is that we're going to be able to accommodate now. So as we showed in one of the last images, where we're in our community building in the fellowship hall right now and in the sanctuary, we just don't have the room right now. So by creating space, it's going to provide accommodation and more comfort. So yes, we have seen people through Angie's wonderful services through Facebook Live, more of an interest in our church, and hopefully that increases congregation membership. But we now have the accommodations and the comfort for our people now.
Lisa did some clarification. I'm sorry, Angie. She intended that question to be regarding receptions in the community building.
Okay. I just wanted to say also, it tends to be that weddings either happen on a Friday evening or a Saturday afternoon evening when the parking at the post office is available. We do now have a policy that people can have receptions in the Bruce Hall. And so people could certainly have a reception in the community hall. We do have a policy because we're half United Methodist, that we're a dry campus. And so that may discourage people from having, if they want to have a reception, you can have a champagne toast. That's acceptable, but we don't have alcohol service. And so right now, I think that would maybe limit the number of receptions that would be in the new hall. But we certainly want it to be a welcoming space. If people wanted to have like a cake and punch reception, that it would be available.
Great. Any other questions from the audience who are watching on Zoom? We'll give a few minutes while they may be typing away. Any other questions from people here? A microphone.
I know the answer to this, but I just wondered if you would talk about the new siding that's going to be on the church, because I think.
Sure, I'll take that one. So in typical Cape Cod fashion, white cedar shingles are the siding of choice. They are what's on the building now, although Angie was nice enough to dig up some older photographs of the church building that show that the exposure or the distance between each course of shingles was narrower originally than it is today. So the idea is that we will replace all of the siding, most importantly for a cohesive look throughout, but because we want to put it back to a more original look, it's important to remove the existing siding and have it match the new. Again, further to the trying to make the new addition blend in as best as possible, it just makes more sense to replace the existing siding. So it will just stick out like a sore thumb. Yeah. You can use it.
Well, I'm not seeing any other questions coming from the Zoom, but on behalf of the Civic Association and the village, we very much appreciate the time and effort that the church representatives have put into putting this meeting together. Speaking for myself, I'm very impressed with the amount of listening that you have done to concerns that have been expressed previously by people in the village. And I think it's reflective of a very smart approach to a project, and I think you have a lot of support from the people in the village. It's not just a church to the village, it's a property that is in fact part of the heart of the village. And so we're all very grateful to all the work that you've done. So thank you.
And we want to continue to be in dialogue. So we hope that if people have questions, if you're watching this at a later time, that you'll reach out.
And we will be sending out a link to the recording of tonight's meeting and discussion. You'll see the emails of the people who would love to hear your questions by email. And obviously, if you have any other questions you'd like to ask, you can always email the Civic Association and we will pass those questions along. So thank you, everybody. And I'll call the meeting to an end.
Yeah.